Imagine your metabolism has a dimmer switch, and insulin is the hand hovering over it. Turn it up all day, and visceral fat sticks like duct tape, even if you're eating healthy. In a controlled crossover study, just 24 hours of lower carb meals noticeably reduced the evening insulin response and improved an insulin resistance estimate before the scale had any reason to react. But if you're snacking, sipping, and grazing, you keep bumping that dimmer back to full brightness, and the fallout is predictable. Louder cravings, harder fat loss, and that post-meal crash that makes you feel like your body is sabotaging you. Stay with me. Because when visceral fat begins to let go, the first win isn't dramatic weight loss. It's insulin finally dialing down. Over time, that dial gets stuck high and quietly rewires your metabolism. What doctors call insulin resistance, often traveling with visceral fat. It's like living next to a non-stop construction site. You adjust until you can't. You feel it as stubborn cravings, heavy crashes after meals, and a waistline that won't cooperate. In the next few minutes, I'll show you what changes first, within hours, then day 1, day 3, and week 1, when the signal finally quiets. Here's the order up front. First, your after-meal insulin peaks get smaller, then your between-meal baseline stays lower longer, and over weeks, your fasting insulin and insulin resistance markers can start trending down. Right after your next meal, think the first 3 hours. The first insulin change is simple. The spike is usually lower. And here's what visceral fat begins to let go actually means in real life. Not that you wake up with abs, but that your appetite stops feeling urgent, your energy steadies out, and your waist starts loosening before anything looks dramatic. When visceral fat starts to ease up, the liver often gets less constant metabolic noise, so it doesn't demand such a huge insulin surge to manage the same plate of food. You can feel it fast, fewer post-meal faceplants and less, "I need something sweet right now," panic. One low-effort move that can help immediately is weirdly practical. Eat protein and non-starchy veggies first, then put carbs last. In crossover research in people with type 2 diabetes, that simple order lowered post-meal insulin compared with starting with carbs, even with the same foods. Value. If you want a quick win today, don't overhaul your diet. Just lower the peak by changing the order your fork delivers the message. Now let's zoom out to the first 24 hours, because day 1 is where your total insulin exposure can drop and your baseline finally gets room to come down between meals. If your day is built on grazing, coffee with a little something, a handful of this, a sip of that, you're basically paging insulin every time it tries to clock out. The goal of day 1 isn't suffering. It's giving insulin fewer reasons to stay elevated. In a controlled crossover trial, just 1 day of reduced carb meals produced a noticeably lower evening insulin response and improved an estimate of insulin resistance compared with a higher carb day. Translation: your pancreas isn't stubborn, it's responsive. Value: run a clean 24-hour test, no liquid sugar, no constant snacking, and meals that don't start with a glucose cannon, so your baseline can spend more time down where it belongs. Days 2 and 3 are the flip, and this is where insulin and visceral fat start acting like dominoes. Visceral fat sits close to the organs and talks loudly to the liver. When it's overstuffed, it tends to push more fatty acids and inflammatory signals toward the liver, which can make the liver less responsive to insulin, so your body has to produce more insulin to get the same job done. When visceral fat begins to let go, that stream calms down, and insulin doesn't have to shout as much, meaning the baseline between meals can stay lower for longer stretches. What you notice is almost annoyingly normal. Cravings lose their megaphone, hunger feels less urgent, and you can go longer between meals without thinking about snacks like they're your emotional support animal. The unglamorous side is the transition tax, headache, fatigue, a little dizziness, because your body is shifting water and electrolytes while it learns a new rhythm. Value: don't white-knuckle day 3. Salt your food, drink water, keep protein steady, and protect those longer, low-insulin stretches like they're the whole point, because they are. Days 4 through 7 are the quiet week, the week where your peaks are smaller, your baseline is calmer, and your body starts feeling more stable. This is where people quit because progress isn't loud, but insulin doesn't send applause. It sends patterns, fewer sharp spikes after meals, fewer crashes afterward, and fewer random cravings that feel like emergencies. And a bonus you didn't ask for. Your brain stops bargaining with donuts at 9 p.m. like it's negotiating a hostage situation. This is also where one habit pays absurd dividends: a short walk after your biggest meal. When you move, muscles can pull in glucose with less insulin required, which flattens the curve and keeps the next spike from getting tall. Value. Week 1 is where you start living with a calmer baseline, and daily life gets easier because insulin isn't running your schedule. Days 8 to 14 are where the title starts sounding true out loud. When visceral fat begins to let go, insulin doesn't crash. It de-escalates. By now, your spikes are less dramatic and your baseline has more time down low, which is basically the metabolic permission slip for stored fat to be used. Visceral fat responds to consistency, not intensity, and as it shrinks, the liver often becomes more insulin sensitive, meaning your body can maintain normal blood sugar with less insulin. Week 2 often feels like your appetite finally joined your team. Your waist may shift before your weight does. Your energy feels steadier, like someone turned down the background static in your day. Value. Stay consistent through week 2 because this is where lower peaks and a calmer baseline start compounding into real momentum. Weeks 4 to 8 are where insulin patterns become predictable, and predictability is the whole game. This is when you're more likely to see fasting patterns improve, not just post-meal spikes. You're also building a feedback loop that finally works in your favor. Less visceral fat means less liver-directed noise, which supports better insulin sensitivity, which means your body can handle the same food with less insulin. That's not magic. That's momentum. Controlled feeding research has shown insulin sensitivity can improve with time-restricted eating patterns even without weight loss, which is a fancy way of saying your body behaves better when it isn't processing food all day. Add 2 short strength sessions each week, and you give glucose a bigger, friendlier place to go, muscle, so insulin doesn't have to overreact. Value, repeatable rhythm, is what makes fasting insulin and sensitivity markers trend the right direction. Weeks 8 to 12 are your proof window because some markers are slow by design. A 1C reflects an average over roughly 2 to 3 months, so it's not supposed to do backflips in 2 weeks. But by this point, if visceral fat has truly started letting go, the insulin story often looks like this. Peaks are smaller, baseline levels between meals are calmer, and fasting insulin or insulin resistance estimates can trend down, especially when sleep improves and ultra-processed carbs aren't daily background music. Value. This is where the data starts matching how you feel, and "I think it's working" turns into "I can see it." One important safety note before you treat this like an extreme sport. If you're on insulin or glucose-lowering medications, don't freestyle big changes alone. Insulin needs can shift, and your clinician should help you adjust safely. For everyone else, here's the clean answer to the title. When visceral fat begins to let go, insulin changes in a signature order. Lower peaks first, a calmer baseline next, and better fasting markers over weeks. So if you want a simple plan for tomorrow, pick one lever: no liquid sugar, carbs last, or a 10-minute walk after your biggest meal. If this made the process clearer, hit like so it reaches someone stuck in the crash cycle. Subscribe for the next timeline breakdown. And comment which lever you're choosing: carbs last, after meal walk, or no snacks.